Let's get to the specifics on spending cuts. You all, to some degree or another, favor cuts in spending for state government. So give us specifics, and let's start with you, David Jones.
Well, right off the bat, we got to look at the HHS, right? We've got a big problem there. Are these clocks working? The clock's not working, by the way.
Obviously, it's not now. We'll see if we can get them activated.
Perfect.
We'll
So
go with a rough idea of how long everyone has.
The HHS is a big problem. And you look at the Maine care system. We've got 409,000 people. Now, what I'm told, and from what I'm finding out, there might be as many as 6,000 illegal immigrants on that as well. That's a boatload of money, considering it ends up costing us about $40,000 per pop. So, you look at that, that's a simple thing. Then you look at, we have 1,500 jobs, right, that are unfunded, but standing there as a slush fund and unfilled. That's $200 million that the Democrats have sitting as a slush fund that they can tap anytime they want. So we really got to, look, we got to lift the hood up. We got to really do a deep dive, and we have to find out if, and Garrett's right, we have to get the House and Senate to work in conjunction with whatever the governor wants to do.
We're going to give all the candidates a shot at this. Garrett Mason, specific spending cuts.
So one of the big things David just said was untapped positions. That is a huge concern. There's about 2,000 of those. That number has grown significantly since I left the legislature in 2018. We did a nice callback of that, and it saved a lot of money. I also would do everything that I can to repeal the Medicaid expansion that happened in 2018, I think. That's a huge piece of money. We also have a guidebook given to us, believe it or not, by Matt Dunlap. He issued a 300-plus page audit of the state government, of which there is no bid contracts. There is all of this stuff in there, including the $27 million in improper autism payments that we're being asked to pay back to the federal government. That doesn't include the state money, by the way. So there's all kinds of places. Everything that I just listed there is well over half a billion dollars, encroaching on $1 billion.
And just on the income tax cut, this is why I want to do it over 8 years, because there's a lot of things that have to come into play to make that happen. On the spending cut specifically, one is, the first move is you got to go after the fraud that's out there, right? The Maine Wire has been able to identify some fraud without a lot of data. If you're the governor, you have all the data, you have the same tools. If you can identify 5 or 10x more and then stop the flow of that and send it back to the people, there's some savings there. 2, we talk about the Maine Care program. I talk to small business owners all over this state, and they say, I have employees that will only work 20 hours. They work any more than that, then they lose their benefits. We need to fly to DC, work with the Trump administration, make sure that we can get a waiver so if they work a little more, they can get 80% of the benefits, 60% of the benefits. Step off of that. It's a win-win, an incentive such that we both save money in the budget and people get better off. These positions that are open, we need to close them, and then each position, they need to come to the governor and make the case. I know it's a little micromanaging, but we've spent a lot more, $3 billion more than inflation the last 7 years. That's just a few things. We can go all day about this. I know the clock's not working, so I'll stop.
Yeah, apologies for that. Ben Midgley, where would you make specific cuts in state spending?
Sure, I'm going to work in reverse a little bit, build up to the biggest expense. So one thing a lot of folks don't know about is the Treasury cash pool. We're holding far more cash than we actually need. We should be able to disperse that back to people. You could have an immediate tax break right there. The fraud oversight in the state, my estimation is there's probably hundreds of millions of dollars there. We've been far too lax on that, and we are spending 3 to 5 times as much for certain services that we shouldn't spend on, that other states are spending the more appropriate levels. The procurement system, the failed audits, obviously there's going to be lots of money to save in there. When you're not going out for best bids, you're not saving Mainers as much as you could. Zero-based budgeting, it was mentioned over here. You have to go back to that so you don't have automatic increases in state spending for different departments each year. And then 77% of the budget is between DHHS and the Department of Education. So if you're going to go for the biggest savings, you have to go for the biggest pool. So if 80% of your budget is combined in 2 departments, that's where you go. And I've talked about this many times. You've got to provide a bridge for folks so they can get off the system. Maine doesn't allow folks off the system.
Robert Wessels.
Yeah, so we need the positions, unfilled positions we already talked about. We need to do a hiring freeze, and we need to block those unfilled positions. That will give us about $200 million to work with. We also need to create work requirements for anybody receiving Maine Care and end government help for non-citizens. We need to put photo IDs on EBT cards and make no-bid contracts the rare exception that they should be. We also need to downsize Maine Department of Education. And now when I'm referring to that, I'm referring to the bureaucracy, not defunding our schools. We need to stop donating to NGOs with taxpayer money. That is not the government's job. And then we need to find and remove the fraud from DHHS. But let me point out in my last 15 seconds here that everything that you're hearing from here, great ideas, absolutely wonderful, none of it will get done without a Republican House and a Republican Senate majority. And so my campaign has been focused and working intensely on elevating the House of Representatives and Senate candidates so we can win the majority. We've worked with 28 other campaigns because that is a priority.
All right, Jonathan Bush.
Well, obviously the biggest spend in Maine state government is healthcare. It's also the biggest expansion over this administration. $5 billion being run by bureaucrats in Augusta who think they're the national healthcare system of the UK or whatever. Tons of fraud coming out in the press. Bad providers getting allowed to tap in and keep getting paid. The mission here, and most importantly there, the Maine care system has crowded out the commercial, actually driven up the cost of commercial systems by suffocating small businesses and creating monopoly pricing power in the last remaining hospital system. We need to expand healthcare options in Maine, which will bring down the cost for everyone. The other thing we need, in order to do that, we need to shred the eligibility of Maine Care back to people who need it, not everybody. We need to get rid of this incredible direct contracting racket going on, get rid of certificate of need law that prevents doctors from being able to build lower cost operations. And then there's lots we can build back, but I won't go into it in the time. This is what I do. I manage $30 billion of healthcare payments in this country with zero fraud and 100% transparency. I can bring the providers that currently don't come to Maine back to the state, which will bring down both state costs and commercial market costs as well.
Okay, Bobby Charles.
Yeah, so I'm going to come right back to my $4 billion income tax cut and property tax cuts. Everything begins with spending cuts. $6.44 billion is beyond where we were just 7 years ago. We're going to cut all the funding for illegal. I'm going to give you specifics.
Exactly where would you cut $4 billion out of the budget?
Here we go. We're going to start right off. Matt Dunlop has given us $2.1 billion in sole source, non-compete, fraudulent contracts given to friends and family. We're going to start there. Then we're going to cut all the funding to illegal alien housing, EBT cards, and Maine Care for these illegal aliens, 8,000 of them. Then we're going to work very specifically on opening up all the books. We have $46 million in just one program in one larger program at DHHS. DHHS is not only unaccountable, it wastes money right, left, and center. We are going to focus on opening the books, digging in. Steve Robinson suggests it may be $500 million, but in the dark of the night, it could be just like Minnesota. We're going to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. I am a former federal investigator for 5 years. We are going to dig in. We're going to turn it upside down. We're going to eliminate it. And I'm also going to tell you about my firm.
All right, we're going to stop. We're going to have to leave you there.
My job as a company, this was a rebuttal. My job as a company, nutshell, was to put out of business drug traffickers and terrorists around the world, every quadrant of the globe. And that's what I did, Jonathan.
I just want to follow up on Maine Care numbers. Mr. Charles, you said 8,000. Mr. Jones, you said 6,000 illegal immigrants on Maine Care.
This is what he does.
But that's 1.5% of the enrollment. And Garrett Mason, you said you would roll back Maine Care expansion. That was 100,000 people. Are you suggesting you would cut 100,000 people from Maine Care?
That would be the goal. I mean, listen,
based on what criteria?
Having 400,000 people on Maine Care is not a laudable goal. It is a death spiral to ridiculous health insurance costs. I opposed it back then. It is no secret that I worked very hard to make sure that referendum did not pass. It should not come to any surprise that I would want to see it rolled back. That is 100% a Republican principle and something that I fought for in the 128th legislature, and I'm sure that everybody on stage would join me in that effort.
So that is... Sure. Just one more thing on homestead tax, in case our audience doesn't know. That's the amount you're allowed to deduct, the homestead exemption, from your appraisal when you're assessed with your property tax. Mr. Jones said $500,000, he would raise it. Mr. Wessel said he would raise it to $300,000. It's only $25,000 now. Do the rest of you have a specific number in mind? Because that's the key way to cut property taxes as governor. Anybody? Just your number, quickly.
No, I think we've got to keep it simple. Simple beats smart. 7 days a week, and all the little programs and exemptions and yeses to all the little groups doesn't get heard in the economy as we're open for business again. We need to make the tax code really, really rock-dumb digestible. And each time somebody offers something to some other group, they make it less penetrable, and we're less open for business.
Does anyone have a homestead exemption?
I do have a very specific one. Look, as a guy who studied tax law, we can, for seniors, we can quadruple the exemption for seniors and for first-time homebuyers so that people who are young in this state will stay in this state because they can afford to stay in the state. It'll also bring rents down.
Rob, you have another question?
We've talked a bit about spending, and I'm not sure that we've gotten really the numbers that add up in the cuts that you're talking about. For instance, if you take off the non-citizens from MaineCare, that's about 8,000 people, and there are about 400,000 on MaineCare. So you're talking a small fraction. Even if you were to take every one of them away, you're not getting close to the billions of dollars that you need to save.
1.5% of the enrollment.
Let me tell you what the answer to that is. Anybody between the ages, as President Trump has already said, 18 and 65, without children, not disabled, able to work, you don't get MaineCare. That's Garrett's 100,000. You don't get MaineCare unless you work 20 hours a week in a real job, volunteer, and it's got to be authenticated, or you go to school, which is a win-win, and we begin to restart the engine of Maine.
Owen McCarthy.
Also outside the box on this, I do have spending cuts, which I laid out where they are. But if in 8 years, our economy is growing at double the GDP, and you look at New Hampshire as a comparable, a lot of their mix is corporate tax because they have a much stronger business environment. We have a stronger business environment that's growing. That will make up a delta. Also, if we strive to flatline the budget, compound interest on all the other lines will catch up. And so it's a cut. It's a grow the economy, and it's make sure that we're efficient with that top line, and then you can replace the income tax with a mix of things. So you can't, it's just not one thing. You got to do multiple things at once to make this work.
All right, Garrett Mason, then we'll get to Ben Midgley.
So I think we're a little off track here. I just wanted to address one thing, and maybe this can help wrap it up. So Robert mentioned one thing about we can't do any of these things if we don't have a Republican legislature. Listen, I would love to live the good old days of 2010 when I was there and we had a Republican trifecta. And I'm going to work every single day to try to make that happen. But here's the reality, and this is what makes me different than anybody on the stage. You know how we reduced income taxes? We did it with Democrats. You know how we reduced fraud, waste, and abuse? We did it with Democrats. You know how we did it? We did it with 2/3 budgets signed by Governor LePage. So what we have to do is we have to have somebody in the office who understands the role of governor both politically and with the bully pulpit, because we can get these things done. I'm going to fight for a Republican legislature every single day. But even if we don't, we have to have somebody with the experience to go through and navigate that and get it done anyways, and I can do that.
Ben Midgley, as briefly as you can, please.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to point out is, I'm not pegging a specific number in terms of reductions, but if you look at the amount of folks that are on welfare in the state of Maine and how they're stuck in that because they're not allowed to work and make enough income, then they lose their benefits. The average income for benefit level for a welfare recipient in the state of Maine is $40,000 in benefits. That's the average income in the state of Maine. So you have to reduce that by giving people the opportunity to go out and make more money. I've talked to plenty of people around the state. For example, there's one person's making $16 an hour, 20 hours a week at McDonald's, and they won't take extra hours or promotions because they're going to lose their health care benefits and all the other benefits. So there's a lot of people in Maine making that calculation right now, and until you turn that system around, it's going to be hard to lower all the spending that we have in the state.
All right.